Hello everybody, welcome back to a new video. As you can see, I am wrapped up, so I hope wherever you are, especially if you are in Europe like myself, you are staying warm and you are staying healthy. I'm not sick, thanks be to God. But in today's session, what we're going to cover is how we're going to explore the DSPM portal, or the upcoming DSPM portal in Purview. Right now it's the DSPM for AI portal. However, come April time this year, according to Microsoft, assuming they don't change their deadline, general rollout will become available for global usage. Okay, so what is DSPM? First of all, data security posture management. Okay, so within Purview, it's seen as the AI governance tool or the AI governance control within Purview. And what Microsoft are doing a really good job at is basically combining agents that are made in Copilot Studio or agents that are made and imported into some of these environments, and then they're showing up in Entra as an identity. You can now see them in Purview as well. You can govern them in Purview, right? So any agents that you're building, because that's what Microsoft really want to focus on. However, when people think of Purview, they don't realize that this is a unique feature or a unique solution within Purview tailored towards AI governance and AI security, agents included in that also. Okay, so of course we're in our trusty CDX environment. Okay, and for those of you who don't know a CDX customer demo, it's designed for pretty much just playing around. It's a sandbox environment. You can do your testing if you're a developer. If you want to do demonstrations like I'm doing now as well, you can show it off to people. It's a great tool. I highly recommend, if you have the capability to get it, that you do so, especially if you're up and coming in the industry as well and you want to learn about how to use Purview. It's a really nice way to just break stuff, okay? Because I think that's how we learn. You have to build it, break it, and rebuild it stronger as well, right? So CDX is a great tool to do that. So speaking of CDX, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our solutions. And what I'm going to show everybody first is a DSPM for AI. Okay, so every Purview portal is going to have this set up, and of course, because Purview is constantly evolving, we're always going to get these pop-ups. And we can see here, even Microsoft are telling us new data security posture management brings together insights from AI and non-AI workloads. Okay, so the idea is that they're going to combine this into just DSPM. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, if I just X out of this for a second and I just click on solutions again, so we can see here that DSPM for AI, we have classic beside it. Okay, and we have DSPM, which is in preview, and you'll often see within Purview there's stuff that has classic, and even if you click on certain portals, even if we go to data loss prevention and go into explorers, we can see content explorer has classic. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be moved around in Purview, right? And I think a lot of us Purview gurus that are in the portal constantly are very used to it. However, you could have a customer, you could be working in an environment where you're stepping away from Purview for a couple of weeks, or you're not too familiar with Purview, and it can be seen as quite an intimidating tool, right? So the goal of this video is to understand how you're going to transition from DSPM for AI into DSPM. Okay, so we'll start from the beginning. If we go to DSPM for AI, which is the classic one, we can see here that there's these basic setups. Okay, obviously we're always going to have the audit log enabled, right? So we can tick that off. But we can talk about the browser extension. We can talk about onboarding devices, the Purview, extending your insights for data discovery. I've done a separate video on this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. I've done a separate video on, talking about activating the audit log in Purview, installing the browser extension, onboarding devices to Purview, and making sure that they're on board in the Defender for Endpoint, and also extending insights for data discovery. So I'm not going to go into too much detail in this video. However, what I want to do is show you how this is going to transition into DSPM. Okay, because obviously there is going to be a change come April, and it's important that people understand what that change is. Okay, so of course with DSPM for AI, we have our reporting, we have our policies that we can make. Even if we have a look at our basic policies, right, we have two enabled, right? One being detect when users visit AI sites, and detect sensitive info pasted or uploaded to AI sites as well. Obviously, there's criteria for the latter, being that the browser extension has to be deployed with an Edge, Firefox, or Chrome. Okay, and obviously when we make these policies, right, it's very important that we go in and we have a look and edit these policies as well, make sure that whatever Microsoft has set up by default, it's not too much, right? Because often when Microsoft are making these policies by default, they're going to put too much sits, and you're going to get too much noise back from these policies as well. Okay, so tailor it to your organization needs. So this is the standard setup, right, in most organizations when they're first looking at DSPM, whether you've gotten a third-party provider to do it or whether you've done it yourself, right? It's a very basic setup, okay? And what this gives us is we can get our reports, we can get our recommendations, all of that good stuff, okay? But what DSPM does that DSPM for AI isn't doing at the moment, right, is that we can see, first of all, it's a new UI. Okay, everything is new, but the reporting is a lot better. Okay, and what I mean by that is one caveat or one thing that I didn't like about DSPM for AI was that the reporting that we got back was just it was very poor. Okay, and Microsoft acknowledged that, and that's why they're introducing this new solution. And I'm a big fan of how they're sending back reports via this DSPM portal. Okay, so I would encourage you, when you are, looking at this DSPM in your own Purview tenants, to explore and have a look around. Okay. When you first set it up, you will be prompted that you need to have certain policies set up in DSPM for AI. One of those policies being a pay-as-you-go policy or a collection policy. Okay, if I go back and I show you really quickly, this one here. All right, so the text-sensitive info shared in AI prompts in Edge. Okay, you don't need to have this enabled. Okay, you're going to get a screen that will show you turn on this policy. You can bypass it, just edit it and make sure that you don't turn it on, because obviously with pay as you go, it's a sensitive topic for a lot of customers. Okay, obviously you're paying for, whether it's E5 licensing or whatever licensing you're paying for. So pay as you go, it's really, specific to whatever need you might have. Okay, but just keep in mind that you don't need to have this policy enabled in order to explore the DSPM portal, because I'm getting a lot of questions from customers asking about that and getting nervous about pay as you go features as well. Okay, so if we go back to our good old DSPM. So we can see here on the left-hand side, okay, we have our objectives, our AI observatory, discover, tasks and actions, and then reports. Okay, and as I said, I want to iterate. This is all in preview. Okay, so I can make a video about this. When I upload this could all change next week. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. But for now, just to understand where we're at with this technology, I think is quite valuable for everybody. Okay, so we have, first of all, our key posture metrics. Okay, so the idea of a key posture metric for DSPM is essentially we can look at our organization's data sources. It can only go back for the last 30 days, but that can include both your non-Microsoft 365 or your Microsoft 365 sources as well. Okay, and that includes whether they're classified or whether they're labeled, right? The activities that was picked up as well, and also the any data, alerts within data investigations that were triggered. We can see those as well. Okay, and a really cool thing about the DSPM is that it's really focused on agents, right? And agents deployed to apps as well. Okay, so we can discover where our agents are, what our agents are doing, if we're deploying agents. And this is going to be very, very important for you as an organization. Okay, when you are looking at building agents, that we have to enable certain policies within DSPM in order to monitor those agents and see what they're doing. Right? We don't want agents being able to travel laterally across the organization, because again, in my last video, I talked about how agents, they're only seen as completed their task when the objective is completed, right? So difference to traditional AI or an LLM, when you're basically prompting, it's done when it gives you back the response, right? Whereas an agent is done when it thinks it's completed its task, right? And that's the real risk when it comes to agents, okay? So if we scroll down through the portal, again, there's no information here because obviously it's all in preview. We can basically see we can set objectives, right? There's the thing called a remediation plan. So if I actually move to the second one here, objectives, and scroll up. So data protection, okay? We can prevent data exposure in M365 Copilot and Copilot interactions. Okay, so if I click on my remediation plan, we're going to see here that there are 3 or 4 policies, 5, even 6 policies, who knows whenever it gets released. But the policies, like DSPM for AI, okay, they are what they say on the tin. Okay, so an example would be protect sensitive data referenced in M365 Copilot and Microsoft Copilot. Okay, so we can view the policy details, or if I click on the policy. So at a high level, okay, we can see, right, this is the name. Content contains any of these sensitivity labels. So this is a policy targeted towards labels, right? I don't see any option here to add in sits. So if I go to edit and just to see, right, so I can't add in any sits. However, what I would assume is that we would have a policy that can also include our sits. Okay, so if I go back to my remediation plan, and if I click on this one here as an example, okay, and we can see now that this is a sensitive info type policy. However, it's enforcing DLP to protect data in Copilot and Copilot interactions, both M365 and normal Copilot as well. However, there's no option to add labels. So we can see that there's 2 separate policies, one for label and one for sits, right? They're essentially doing the same thing, okay, but they're just using two different technologies, because as I said before in my previous videos, DLP and classification, they work great together, but you can also do them separately. Okay, and then we always get a nice description. Sensitivity labels keep your data safe by limiting access. A DLP policy has been automatically created in simulation mode. Enforce the policy by blocking sensitive data for being processed by Copilot. Okay, and we can always create a custom DLP policy. So when we click on this, it will open up a new tab for us. And then once this tab's loaded, we can basically edit the policy as we see fit. We can add stuff in, add stuff out, however we want to go about it. I would always recommend, like I said before, guys, when it comes to Microsoft and when it comes to making policies by default, right? If I just go and I make this policy here, apply, I'm uncomfortable. The reason why I'm uncomfortable is because you want to build it from the ground up. Now, Microsoft are getting very good at doing that, okay, especially in the new DSPM. When we decide to make a policy or click it, as fast as we're doing now, we are going to have more options or view details, as we can see here, to understand, right, what's actually happening with this policy. Okay, now obviously, because there's nothing in a CDX environment, this is empty, okay, and it obviously will give us time to understand what's going to happen or what this policy is going to do. But like I said before, this is me being a bit pedantic and a bit of a perfectionist. Always go back to the policy wherever it was made. So if we go back to our data loss prevention policy, we go back to policies here, right? And we just let this load for a second. Sometimes it can take a minute to come in. So this is the new policy, the 12th of February, right? So if we go into this policy here and we just edit the policy, because again, we always have to check what Microsoft have added. Okay, now it's in simulation mode, which is good, okay, because obviously even if there's actions on this policy, nothing's going to affect anything. Where is it scoped to? We can see it's scoped to M365 Copilot and Copilot Chat, okay, which I've covered in the previous video as well, but there's no rule, which is quite interesting, right? So as before, as I said, Microsoft are getting better at allowing us to build the policy up, okay? So before, in the DSPM for AI policy, when you'd make it, you would fill it with 20, 30 different sets, right? It was just far too much, and people were getting way too much noise, right? And that's hence why it affected the reporting, okay? So we can see here with these new policies, there's no rules created, okay? So as a result, right, the caveat to this, right, even though it's becoming more user conscious and user aware of making policies automatically, the caveat is we need to know how to build DLP policies, or your team is going to need to know how to build DLP policies. Okay, Microsoft aren't going to even set the rule for you, right? You're going to have to build it from scratch. I'm not going to say it's going to be the same for all of these rules. And again, as I said, it's in a preview, right? So all of this could change come tomorrow. But if we go to create a rule just to see what options we have. So again, this to me just looks like a standard rule, there's nothing crazy here. There's no weird features. However, because we scoped the Copilot, right, in the locations, we're only going to have one action, right, which is going to be restrict Copilot from processing content. And the actual restriction is accessing knowledge sources. Okay, so we can add our sits, as I said before, content contains, add sensitive info types, and all the good stuff there. And of course, we can do the same for the labels as well in the other policy or in this policy as well. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, it's better when we're making DLP to specify what the policy is and make sure that we understand why the policy is active, right, as part of a best practice approach. But if we go back to the DSPM, again, go back to our objectives. So it's important for everybody to understand, right, do these objectives align with what I want to get out of my business from a security and governance perspective? Okay, because obviously there's going to be default protections. We can see them here. Okay, the Copilot interactions are scanned for sensitive data. Copilot honors sensitivity labels and permissions. As I said, I think it was in my first or second video, the architecture of Copilot. If you're unfamiliar with how Copilot works, I highly recommend that you watch that and understand how it interacts with the tenant and your Graph API and your user permissions and your compliance and security also. And it's obviously going to be compliance with AI regulations, and then specific SharePoint sites can be also restricted from using Copilot. Okay, so the real important thing to know about DSPM, especially if you haven't explored how you're going to protect AI, is that it's going to be a vital feature in Purview. Okay, and Purview in general, guys, is going to be a massive guardrail, right, against prompt injections, against people not knowing how to upload documents to AI safely, right, if you don't have a label taxonomy in place, right, because obviously not every organization is going to have Copilot specific labels. They're not going to have Copilot specific DLP policies, and that's why DSPM is created. Right, or that's one of the reasons why DSPM is created. It's not the sole reason, right? There's obviously other great features as well, but most organizations might not have a DLP strategy. They might not have a label strategy. So DSPM is going to be a very nice feature for those organizations who may be a bit behind, right? For those who are, at a great stage of data protection or kind of in their advanced, stages of data protection, DSPM is still great for agents, right? Because obviously the next step from Copilot would be, how do we monitor or protect an agent? So it's really tailored for everybody, that no matter what level you're at, right? DSPM can be used to basically make sure that you're, protected and locked down. Okay. So the AI Observatory, then, following on from objections, essentially what this does is it gives you an oversight of your agent activity. Okay, so obviously I have no agents in my CDX environment. Okay, but obviously yourselves as your own organization, it's a great way to click on and see if you're building agents. Are they showing up in Purview? Okay, are they showing up in DSPM? Okay, and the last part of the DSPM, guys, right, probably the most important part for a lot of people, is going to be the tasks and actions. Okay, so your setup tasks and your remediated actions. Okay, so it's kind of similar to what we see in Defender for Cloud Apps in terms of the UI, right? Similar to what we saw on the DSPM for AI portal, right, in terms of the 4 insights that we had to set up as well. So this is still going to be your user kind of get start guide with DSPM. Okay, so I'd highly recommend that you explore this and you understand how it works. Okay, it's the same thing for remediation actions. There's 14 or 13, I believe, right, that we're always going to need to get it set up from a baseline perspective. Okay, so we can see here there's 13 that I haven't started. So fortify your data security. If I click on this, it's going to give me a bunch of policies that we've seen that I can basically create. But again, we always double check, right, when we make a policy, what's in that policy. Okay, we make sure as well that there's a few pay-as-you-go that we don't want to have enabled, right, or assuming that it's not aligned to your objectives or your goals. So be very, very careful when you're making a policy. Is it pay-as-you-go? Is it not pay-as-you-go? Understand how your billing is set up. It's going to be very, very important for DSPM, but I do have to put that as a caveat that there is going to be some pay-as-you-go features within DSPM, and just be fully aware of that. Okay. Again, it's in preview. It could change, right? Okay. Don't hold me to that. Within 2 months, it could be completely different. But it's very, very important for yourself to understand what's coming down the line and how, more importantly, you can use it, right, wherever you are on your journey. Okay. Whether it's from the beginning or the end or the middle, it doesn't matter. All right, guys, look, we're going to wrap it up. I hope you found the video useful. Again, it was just more of a high-level video. We did do a bit of a technical session, but we didn't go too deep. Okay, it's to just understand what DSPM for AI is, where it started, right, as we saw in the previous video, right, where it's going to evolve into, and why it's evolving into DSPM. Okay, so if for your customers, or if you're dealing with customers, or if you are a customer yourself, the focus should be simple, right? Know your data, classify what matters, and understand how AI is accessing your data as well. Okay, so it's going to amplify whatever agents or whatever AI workflows you're having at the minute in your organization. DSPM is there to help us out, and it's going to amplify our vision. Right, so whatever governance we're using in Purview, DSPM is there to amplify it. Okay, and again, like I always say, technology is there to help us. We're there to use it. We're there to understand it. Right, it's not there to give us more of a headache. Right, and I really hope with this new feature coming out within the next couple of months that we achieve the goal of AI governance and AI security first. So I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.